Hello, my name's David Hewson. I write books set in Rome, and I'm here to talk to you about the fifth in the Nic Costa series, The Seventh Sacrament. You can listen to this as a podcast if you like. Equally, you can listen to it as a sort of audio-video podcast. If you head off over to my website, davidhewson.com, you will see lots of pretty pictures taken in Rome during the researching of this book, which may illuminate the subject a little more. The question I'm always asked about Rome is, why did you pick that place, not somewhere else? And the answer is very easy, really. I just find it's full of stories. How do I get them? Well, the way writers have got them over the years, I imagine. I walk around, I talk to people, I think, I look, I try to see in places I'm probably not supposed to see. The idea for this book had been hanging around for years, actually, because I'd noticed when I wandered around Rome that there were an awful lot of underground sites with big iron bars on them and a sign that essentially says, this is a very interesting place, but you're not welcome. It's too dangerous, it's too precious, it's a place that the public should not see. I'm the kind of person who, once he's told shouldn't go somewhere, immediately wants to get inside. And so after a little while, I decided that's exactly what I was going to do. I signed up with an organisation called Roma Sotterriana, who are a bunch of enthusiasts who like going into underground Rome, kind of amateur archaeologists, some professional archaeologists, potholers, spelencers, I think you'd call them in America. A very nice and interesting bunch of people who spend their weekends going into places that most people simply don't know exist. The thing about underground Rome is it's vast. It runs for miles and miles. You can find underground sites right in the very centre of the modern city. Equally, if you go out into the hinterland of the Appian Way, you can find things there. You can find temples, you can find streets, you can find catacombs. And the more time I spent messing around in underground Rome, the more I thought, I really want to write a story set in this kind of environment. A number of things nag you about Rome over the years, and a lot of them are to do with its history and how it impacts upon our world today. I'd always been fascinated by the Emperor Constantine, who the history books will tell you is the man who essentially gave us Christianity in many ways, because he declared that Rome, once he took over the state, would be a single religious entity. Christianity was king, and the paganism that had been part of Roman society for getting on for 1,000 years was completely dead. The odd thing about Constantine is nobody really talks very much about him. He's a saint in the Greek Orthodox Church, but you won't see him mentioned a lot in Rome, and certainly not by the Catholics. Why is that? Well, he's not a very nice guy, actually. He liked killing people. He was a politician, not a religious zealot. He was simply interested in power, and Christianity helped him get it. The Praetorian Guard, who were on the other side in his battle in the Civil War for Rome, got wiped out the moment he came into the city, as did many of the Mithraic temples, which were used by soldiers and civil servants in the Roman state. The connection? Mithraic temples virtually always were built underground. As I explored subterranean Rome, I came across more and more of them, and even one that had actually been destroyed, desecrated, probably the scene of some kind of a massacre, the very day that Constantine entered Rome. When I hear stories like that, my mind starts ticking, and it's around a story like that that the Seventh Sacrament begins. At the opening of the book, we find ourselves on the Aventino Hill in a little square designed by the artist Piranesi outside the mansion of the Knights of Malta. This is a beautiful, quiet, deserted part of Rome, one where you don't see many tourists. And when they do turn up, it's usually in a taxi in that square. They hop out, they walk over to a rather battered old green door, bend down, peer through it, and then they're on their way. What's happened? Well, if you look on my website, you can see exactly. The keyhole of this door, the door to the mansion of the Knights of Malta, is aligned precisely across the River Tiber with the dome of St. Peter's. It's the most extraordinary piece of architectural sleight of hand you're likely to encounter, even in Rome. And I have to peer through it every time I go back there, actually. Looking through that keyhole that day is a young child, Alessio Bramante, who's with his father. Alessio is kind of the key to this story because shortly he's going to go missing and nobody really knows what's happened to him. But for him, peering through the keyhole is a fixed point in his life. He's clearly an uncertain, perhaps unhappy child. His father is a difficult man, a professional archaeologist, an expert on the underground city of Rome himself. And his father is about to take him to see a miracle, a find within the hill of the Aventino, which is the greatest Mithraic temple ever discovered, one that clearly has been the scene of some kind of massacre from the moment that Constantine entered Rome. The Seventh Sacrament is divided between two eras. One is 14 years before the main part of the book, and this is where we meet Alessio Bramante. That past section is the story of a tragedy, Alessio's disappearance in mysterious circumstances in which his father may or may not have been involved, and the vengeance his father took upon a group of students who he holds responsible for his son's disappearance. At the close of this tragedy, it is Giorgio Bramante who goes to jail for murder, not any of those people that the public at large think was actually responsible. The modern part of the story begins when Bramante, apparently now a model prisoner, is released from jail 14 years later. At this point, it becomes apparent he is actually taking his revenge upon those students he can still find scattered among Roman society, but also upon others he blames, among them Leo Falcone, a skeptical junior officer at the time of his jailing, but now an inspector in the Roman police and Nic Costa's direct boss and friend. This is the story of two quests, a quest on the part of Leo Falcone to track down Giorgio Bramante, and a quest on the part of Bramante himself to find those he holds responsible for his son's disappearance. But behind this whole story lies the fate of Alessio, which remains unknown after 14 years. Did he die? Was he snatched? Did he merely disappear? Nobody really knows. And that is what nags all of the men involved in this story, and Nic Costa himself too, for some very personal reasons. There are a few themes hanging around this story, and I don't think it's the job of an author to tell you what they are really, but I'll give you a clue about one of them. This is a story, I think, about fatherhood, about how difficult it is to be a good father, and how easy it is for the slightest mistake to go wrong and come back and haunt you in the most terrible ways. Again, Mithraism to me is a good vehicle for telling such a story, because the cult, as little as we know about it, had some form of strong hierarchical structure. And the one who was the boss guy, the top priest, the man who was responsible for everybody else, was called Pater, father. He was the father not just to his own children, but to his entire community. Giorgio Bramante wanted to be a good father and failed, and that, I think, haunts him more than anything else in this particular story. It's also a tale that I hope takes you to a few of my favourite places in Rome, places that often aren't on the tourist map. There's not an awful lot of the Centro Storico, the historic centre of Rome, where Falcone and crew are nominally based in this story. Much of the action takes place on the Aventino Hill, which is a very quiet, beautiful suburb with lots and lots of history. And it also takes place in Testaccio, which is the neighbouring working class quarter, one of the last real places of Rome that can call itself local, I think, in many ways. And as with many of my books, I use real places in this. Some of them are made up, but most of them really are there, including the little Museum of Purgatory, that creepy little place on the Tiber where the book begins in its modern section. You can find some of the pictures I took during my research here. You can also see a lot more if you go to Flickr and search for the book title as well. And if you go to Google through the link on my site, you will see a map of Rome which is linked to actual locations, again with some of the pictures that I took at the time I was researching it and with a few of my notes. I hope you find these useful, and perhaps that they even bring the book a little more to life for you. Rome is an extraordinary place. I never tire of going there, and I have a list of stories as long as my arm that I really would like to write before long. I also hate the idea of writers being solitary creatures locked in attics, never ever communicating with the outside world. Books are about communication, they're about telling stories, they're about reaching people, and it's great to be able to do this through the modern medium of the internet in so many different ways. So there you are, the Seventh Sacrament. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for taking the time to stop by.